Cool. So I guess we'll start how we normally start, which is revealing the card, which is the Nine of Thunder, but in the Gentle Tarot, the thunder equates to swords. Nine of Thunder. This card acknowledges your sleepless struggle and invites you to entertain a new perspective. Sometimes the repetitive negative thoughts are inspired by habit. Sometimes they're influenced by how physically exhausted you are. It's helpful to step out from the pit and observe in a third person perspective to better understand how you can pull ourselves out when you need to. Be gentle with yourself. Grief and regret are not simple. There are things that we may never fully understand, and that is okay. Feel the feelings and cry the tears, but come back to the center when you are done. You are pure love. Thank you. And then I got the top deck too, which is like, so it's just, right, it's like a bunch of swords, and then the message there is cruelty. And kind of what I was reading in the book was about swords, swords being that kind of mental energy and that kind of mental anguish when you're just grinding on something and needing to like can't find a way out, and eventually you just need to surrender to love or to sorrow or to grief. So that's interesting. This follows like our conversation around death. It's almost like a precursor to the death, or to resisting the death, or not knowing how to engage with the process of dying.
Well, as usual, this relates with the full moon, because this is the 9th card of this suit, and 9 is the number associated with Sagittarius, because from Aries, Sagittarius is the 9th. So, we're undergoing a full moon also, so that's about letting things go. And what Sagittarius opposes is Gemini. So Gemini is a lot of thoughts, lots of fast thoughts, conflicting thoughts, want to take action and resolve things, check things off the checklist. It's the taskmaster. So this is that struggle of, there's so many ways that I could go about doing this, or there's so many different options that I want to keep open. I don't want to make a decision because I don't want to eliminate things. So keeping yourself up at night just with so many different Gemini, thoughts.
For me, the imagery of the card is really interesting, especially the first one you showed us, because she's wearing, it seems like it's a dress, right? And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful dress. So it's, I don't know, it's this idea to me that like you're using those thoughts and those emotions as a sort of like skin in between you and the outside, and it's in the way you present. And I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but there's something about it being presented in the form of a dress that is really interesting to me.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because that also struck me in this image, because it looks like a black cloak, dress cloak, but it's made with the night sky essentially. So like these little lines are the thunder, and then there's like stars. So she's cloaked in the night sky, the thundering night sky. And as she's kind of looking up, I think of maybe like at the sun or the moon. I can't, whatever. It's hard to tell. That resonates because it's like all the thunder within. And then I notice for myself when I'm in that place, like what's being called, the move that's being called to me is to surrender. And like, that's usually where I go. It's like, I go to the moon and I just go, I have no idea how to get out of this maze. I don't know how to solve this problem set. My mind doesn't know. And help me find the way. That's often my prayer when I'm kind of in that state of total chaos and anguish and feeling of lostness, is a move of powerlessness and helplessness, to surrendering to something bigger than myself.
I can kind of see it on her face as well. I might be, because I've got the print screen here. I might be projecting, but there's some helpless surrender, anguish, despair, but surrender as well to that which is higher, or I don't know, to the unknown, to the moon. And the words carrying the thunder, because that's what she's doing, because there's nine thunder marks on her black dress, so she's carrying the thunder. I don't know what that means, but that's just jumping out at me.
Well, thunder for me is associated with, I think it's Gene Key 51, and I should know this because it's my life's work, but it's also Rebecca's. So we share that. And thunder is the name given to it by Bella and Ashley at Unlock Your Design, but it's about initiating and kind of shocking people to make their own change. So it's almost like you and I, Lizelle, talk about being that vessel within which two things can come together and make more sense. Like that's what some of our purpose seems to be, is that we can make contradictions come together with our interests. And it's kind of something too, that it's provocative, it's shocking in a way that people don't want to hear it, whatever it is that you have to say. So that's something too, is this whole like, because Rebecca would have been here with the card, but I did have it ready, where the Nine of Swords, it's distraught and it's not able to make a decision or come to a conclusion. So or even face the truth. Like, I don't want to face it, the shocking thing that's been presented to me. So that's kind of part of my role in life, is to present that to people, to present something to them that they don't necessarily want to see. And maybe, it's funny because thunder oftentimes, not always, represents rain, or there's like rain. And so that's something that we pray for. That's something that we really hope for. And so in that case, like, thunder isn't necessarily something you don't want. So I don't know, but it is still a little bit abrupt and shocking. It's jarring, and it makes you pause and realize that there is something bigger. That's one of those things that just gives you that revelation.
In the top deck, it's Mars and Gemini, which is interesting.
Isn't that kind of what the card is about? About facing that which you don't really want to face. Like,
I think in that sense, I like the thunder imagery maybe more than the sword. When I think of thunder, and not just thunder itself, but like a thunderstorm, lightning, it makes me think, because I remember reading once about how one of the worst ever like heat waves, I think in the US, like 20 something years ago, part of the reason why it was so lethal in Chicago, I think it's because there were no thunderstorms for a long time. And usually that's what thunderstorms do. They take away the humidity out of the air. And once you, and having like high heat with high humidity is that's what's lethal. Because then that means that when you sweat, you can't really use that to regulate your temperature. And that's what ended up killing people. So to me, since I heard that, I've always had a new appreciation for thunderstorms. Like, oh, it's not just a scary thing, it's the actual thing that cleans the air. And I guess, to me, linking that to thought and emotions and this kind of, I guess what it's saying, it's like, it's gonna happen regardless. So it's up to you whether you try to suppress this stuff until it becomes like a violent outburst, or maybe you just surrender to it and maybe don't dance in a lightning storm, but there might be something else that can be done. I'm not sure. But yeah, but there's something about it. I don't want to say purifying, but there's something about the role that thunder has in the cycle of things that is very important. Like it's extremely important, and I think we often overlook it because we're so linked to the sound and what it does. but what it does for air and what it does for the cycle of things, it's incredibly important.
I've been caught in some lightning storms. One in particular, like up on like 11,000 feet elevation in Colorado. So on the mountaintop, basically, just surrounded by granite and trees, and in the middle of the night, and just in my tent, and like the lightning being so bright, even when you close your eyes, it jolts you awake. Like there's light coming into you, even with your eyes like tightly shut. And that's exactly what I needed to do. And my mind was going, what do I do? Like, do I get, like, what do I can't, how do I get out of this, And eventually I just had to come to this place of total surrender to destiny, where it was like, either it's going to strike me or not. And I have to just, and so then, I mean, there was so much like tension. I didn't like, again, trying to get out of it, like, but where can I go? And if I get out, I'll get hypothermia. So there is something, it was such a powerful moment of just going, I couldn't sleep, and just going, all right, if it's going to strike me and I'm going to die, I'm going to die. Like that. So all I can do is actually just sink in and relax my body. If I'm going to die, I might as well just be calm and in doing it. But it took like spinning my wheels for a while to kind of finally get to a place where I surrendered to destiny. It was like, there was no other choice. It was like, you have to just stay here in your tent and let this thing roll out. And if it's going to get you, it's going to get you. And if not, then you got another day. The gods were merciful for you. So
I told you, Holly, I kind of now, it's coming together. I kind of experienced an emotional thunderstorm this week. Maybe yesterday morning, or maybe the morning before. I can't quite remember. I think it was yesterday. No, it was the morning before, where I felt so tense inside of me because of all this pressure from the ritual and everything, and expectations, personal expectations and things that I can't control, that I'm trying to control. And I cried, but like not a normal cry, like a thunderstorm cry. Like I could feel it rip through me, almost something rip through me. And then after that, I was so calm. It was indeed the surrendering to destiny, or to fate, or because what else can we do really? But it's like also emotionally, coming back to Isa, thunderstorms seems to have really an important role to play in our well-being.
Yeah. And the other thing is, like, when you finally surrender, there's an ability then to have this awe, to go, okay, like it's going to get me or it's not. Now I can just like look at this thing and just be amazed by the power, right? And of course, like Zeus being associated with thunder and lightning, and how oftentimes that was like enlightenment, right? That was like rapid alchemy of transforming something, transmuting something, illuminating something. That killing was actually leveling up, right? But yeah, just that ability, when you can surrender, then that fear switches into awe, and then you're on a totally different ride.
Yeah. So what like was coming up for me when you were speaking was like, and then you ended it with a totally different ride, is the effect that social media has on us. And like, this looks like someone sitting up in their bed on their phone. And the, hijacking of that system of us feeling, I wrote yesterday, we're crying one moment because a man saved a dog, and then the next moment we're pissed at a group of people for disagreeing with our opinion. And it's just like, whoa, 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 whoa. And what do people practice then? Because they're not practicing meditation. They're not putting space in their day. In those moments, they're going to jet fuel or like crash, from sadness or whatever. And yeah, like I even said, like sometimes I feel like the universe brings me a good cry through social media. And I feel like, yeah, that was really cathartic. That felt really good. Finally, I was able to cry because I've been repressing that. But then if you're not doing that mindfully, if you're, just scrolling and every single thing you're reacting to, then what are you going to do when you go out in the real world? Because this is all practice. So that's the big concern, is that no longer are these I don't know, thoughts just ruminating in your mind. You can actually physically hold them in your hand and see that other people get to experience things, or other people are in danger and you could help them if only you could get there. Like all of these feelings that people are getting, their hormones, endorphins, serotonin, all this rushing through, causing their brain to pump in different ways, and then it's forming in a different way. It's just like this whole cycle of programming is just getting more embedded, because the 90s, it was there running in the background. The 80s, it was definitely there, especially in some countries more than others, And I think that like propaganda has always been here, but now it's just like it's in your bedroom at night while you're going to bed, and you wake up in the morning and it's the first thing that you stroke, So
There's something coming up for me just about people longing, craving to feel something,
Oh, yeah.
at any cost, or like you said, without that discernment. Um,
well, and when you said that, what came up for me is like, yeah, a steel through me, that would hurt. Or electricity running through my body from lightning, that would hurt. So like both of those things is like cold steel or shocking electricity. I don't know. They both gave me this kind of, yeah, feeling.
A few years back, maybe it relates to what you want to say, Holly. I read a research how the thing that people are feel most trapped by is boredom. And maybe that is why we so desperately long for that sword to pierce us, or that thunder to strike us. It's what people most desire, according to that study at that time, here in the Netherlands, was to be surprised, to something extraordinary, something out of ordinary just happening to their lives, because everything is so organized. And that being said, in the Netherlands, I think in some countries that's not the case. but
even then, I would say that, like Sarah was saying, all this constant influx of things that have made us be quite passive in relation to them, because you're just there like receiving the thing and seeing it, and it's supposed to entertain you. I think at this point it's affecting everyone, even in places where I would say that, I mean, as long as you have like easy access to any of those platforms. But yeah, no, I saw the other day, I don't know what it was. I think it was like, I wanted to see something, and I guess it was on a Tumblr blog, and I don't have an account, so Tumblr was telling me like, oh, if you want to keep reading, you need to make an account. And their marketing, like their ad literally says, never be bored again. Like that's how they promote it. And I was like, yeah, this is not okay. Like there's something here about being bored, and it's been going on for a while. I think Eric Fromm talks about it too, when he's talking about the reason why he feels like people are not able to love anymore. And he talks about a few things, but they said the number one thing is that people cannot be with themselves. Like if you cannot be with yourself, if you cannot sit down with your own thoughts, with your own everything, there's no fucking way. I don't know if we swear in this show.
Fuck yeah, we do. We'll fucking swear them what we want.
My show.
Yeah. Oh, bullshit.
But,
fucking swear.
Yeah. but if you can't be with yourself, and that means being with yourself when everything is boring and not stimulating, and the only thing that you have is thoughts running in your head. If you can't do that, there's no fucking way you can be with anyone. No way. Because then, like, you're not fully you in order to receive or give anything. So he says, like, he talks about different things. I think he frames it in terms of patience, which is like, or being able to be still with yourself. I don't remember the exact words anymore, but that's really stood out to me. And he's not the only person who says something like that. I've read it in a few other places. So there's something about that, like the fear of boredom. And I'm not sure why that is or what it means or what's behind that. What is the terrifying thing about being bored? Is it because it means that you think you're not using your life well, like, or because you were expecting life to give you candies on every door you knock? Like, I'm not sure, but there's something there.
I think about boredom as like a failure of curiosity, and like and it's interesting, like how you were mentioning, Issa, the card, she's wearing the thunder right within. There's something here for me about control and inner and outer as well, where if we can look at all the chaos on the outside, there's a false sense of control, right? But if you close your eyes and you feel the chaos within you, there's a sense of like no control a lot of times. And again, this card sort of uplifting and pointing to the need to sort of surrender, actually the paradox of the power in becoming powerless, right? That there's this like call to humility, the call to surrender to something bigger. But if we externalize all of that, then there's a false sense of control of like, oh, this is on social media and this isn't me. This isn't me. This is the world around me happening. Where it's like, actually, no, inner and outer aren't really so separate. Yeah, that fear, I think, of having to face the thunder within, the chaos within, and not knowing how to navigate that. Because there's not a lot of guidance in the world right now that's very wise or knows we haven't been here before, and that's scary.
It basically just means being distracted constantly.
I think that we want propositional knowledge, like facts. If I can collect facts. And there's no recognition of life experience. So that elder wisdom, you got to work for elder wisdom. You have to sit with them. You have to listen to them tell the same story over and over and over again. And every single time you're going to get a different lesson from it, from yourself, for however it applies to the day. Even if it was, thank God I could be patient with grandpa today and listen to him tell the same fucking story again about snakes being around the island that he, was living on. So like, and I remember like there was, when I first got out of my relationship, going to my dad and thinking like I could just collect archetypes of people. Like, Dad, tell me your biggest fear. Okay, cool, locked in. Great, that's a character trait of mine now, as if this was literally a video game and I could just like access those things by pressing X and the down button and then pull up Dad's ability to resist this fear. But that's not what it is. Like you take on their likeness as you get to know them, and then you embody those traits, and you don't even know some of the things that you pick up from them, some of the mannerisms. And so then you start working through that too. But yeah, I don't know why that came to me, but I think that's just, the reason that we're buzzing about, and, well, maybe not the reason, but boredom is not something that is luxurious. Like nobody's, maybe some people are now, counterculture people, is taking pictures of themselves bored somewhere. Like, yeah, I'm not doing anything, I'm bored, but it's like still making content, still thinking of how to be in the face of public and productive in some sort of way, even if it's to present this idea of, but I don't do anything, I'm just a bored person. And so it's like commoditizing even the boredom. But yeah, that's the place where kids pretend. I mean, kids are going to forget how to play. We're not going to have play anymore if kids are, filling their boredom in with something all the time, because the boredom is where the imagination comes in. It's where you start to explore your mindscape. So their mindscape is going to be built up literally like Minecraft, where it's like 8-bit boxes. and even, like when I was gardening with my niece and nephew, they were like, this is kind of like Roblox. I was like, it is nothing like Roblox. But, maybe conceptually. But anyway, all that to say, like, not the pursuit of, factoids and knowledge. This is also the Gemini Sagittarius axis, that dynamic of philosophical wisdom in Sagittarius, and like the pursuit of truth. What is the real things that we should be believing in? Where Gemini is, George Washington was the first president of the United States. Like little bitty factoids like that, little pieces of knowledge that you can use to maybe navigate this world. But it's not like, in what direction are you navigating this world? Otherwise, you're just spinning in one place. And when you were saying Mars and Gemini, that's what came up, because we went through 7 months of Mars and Gemini last year, and that never happens. Mars usually goes through a sign a month, so we spent 7 months with Mars and Gemini, and that was just a lot of spinning our wheels and projects not taking off, and just like a lot of spent energy, because Mars is our action and how we take action in this world, and Gemini is just buzzing.
I just want to defend knowledge here. What we have a surplus of is information, not knowledge. I was just thinking this morning, actually, our knowledge has become so superficial because we have lost depth of memory. We don't know how to remember anymore because we don't have to remember. We have information at our fingertips, so we can just look things up, like I just did, whenever we want. So we severely lack depth of knowledge, actually, I think. There's a difference between knowing, especially then when you look at Vervaeke's 4 P's of knowing. Also, knowing how to, knowing what it's like, and knowing by being, which I think is Gnosticism, like, or a Gnostic way of knowing, like, knowing by participation. So I don't think we have too much, because for me, knowledge is something deeper and more connected than information. And what we have is all these bits of loose bits.
That reminds me of something that Rebecca told me when I had my ritual making session with her the first time we talked. And it was something along the lines of like, you don't need to understand something to know it. And there's something there too. It's like, I think you're making a good distinction between information or facts, like Sarah was saying, and knowledge. And when you said like facts, I was like picturing this like squirrel collecting acorns, but it's just a bunch of facts. It's like storing it somewhere, but like that won't feed you for winter. No, but what you said, Liz, also reminded me, there's that thing of like our memories have gotten worse because now we have other things where we put it. But it also reminded me this thing that I've thought of before, is like, I remember when I started learning like architecture, they made us draw everything by hand. And it was this thing where you were like, oh my God, you were like almost shaking every time you needed to trace something in ink, because it was like, oh, if I fuck this up, I lost 4 hours, and it was like just this amount of care and attention you need to put into this thing, because you just have a finite amount of time to do it. And so you can't just explore every possible option. Whereas now, as things get more digital and we have like the infinite space of drawing in a computer, and now the infinite space of telling ChatGPT to come up with whatever bullshit, then that intention, it's lost. You can allow yourself to pay less attention to how you do things. And I think because of that, you're not really doing the things. So maybe this boredom is also a little bit of that. It's like, it's lack of doing. It's not lack of stimulation, it's lack of doing. And it's just like somehow
lack
the
of
things
attention. I want to point out, you said attention. It's that lack of attention. And now please go on. I just wanted to point that out.
No, but there's something about that, right? It's like, now if I have infinite space and infinite memory and infinite time and infinite everything and infinite algorithmical variations of something, then I can just like whatever. In not only lack of attention, I think my concern with this is that I don't know if we're going to a place where it's going to reach a point where there's so many cheap options and variations of anything that we won't even be able to make choices anymore. So we're going to start also delegating, okay, out of this 100 million different things that the AI spit out, which one is the best? Because like, I'm still a human that has finite time to look at every single one of them and pick the best one. So now I'm thinking like, then what's the point of all of that? What's the benefit of having 100 million options if I won't have the time to actually ponder them with care? You can't. So now we're gonna have like the AI that checks the AI that checks the AI because the humans can't do it. I mean, I'm not sure if that's really how AI works, but the point is, whatever it is, as we make things like cheaper to make and easier to make in these kind of digital realms, we are losing our ability to choose, our ability to pay attention, our ability to be responsible for something too, because now we're also delegating choices to some entity to decide for us because we possibly cannot. So this sudden idea of like, oh yeah, we figured out how to automate everything to be produced to fulfill our needs while I frolic on the grass, then how is that going to work? Isn't everybody going to be super bored? Isn't that the ultimate terror?
Well, this circles to what Sarah was presencing at the beginning of the anguish actually coming from too many choices, right? It's like I can't make a choice because there's too many options. And I really appreciate, kind of what I'm hearing is that actually a lot of the discernment is all being presence just up in here, right? And actually like knowledge, like we have isolated this as the main sensing organ that's like responsible for everything. And there's knowledge, like our fingertips are brains in and of themselves. Like there's so many nerve endings and there's so much sensation in our hands. This is a brain, right? And when I touch this, there's information that comes in that's potent. And when we're not putting our hands in the dirt, when we're not making things with our hands, when we're not engaging all of our senses, all of that decision making and information just gets isolated and all unevenly distributed up into this space. And I think part of, and what Sarah was saying too, like there's a difference between looking at something on your phone and thinking about it versus getting your hands in the dirt and like feeling the wind on your face. And so much of this too, of course, this is my perspective on things, is again our loss of connection with the natural world or nature. I mean, it's all nature, but like, right, that less manipulated, because it's so hard to be bored actually when you're engaged outside. It's like there's so many patterns and everything's a fractal, and it's like there's so much to be curious about when you're out there and engaged, and it's choosing you in so many ways as well. And anyways, yeah.
Engagement. I want to point out from what you said, I want to point out the word engagement. Attention, engagement. That's the antidotes to boredom.
Yeah. It's engaging all the senses too. It's not isolating it to just the mind. It's like we have our mind super engaged. I mean, this is what the swords, right? The swords are like mind. And again, the balance being okay, well, engage your hands, engage your smell, engage your listening, engage. It's like, let the mind actually be the receiver of actually all the information that the body is engaging with in the world. Like, kind of, my sense is we need to make kind of below our neck more primary, or like, like our other senses more primary. That's like common sense, using your senses to create a common connection, which is knowledge. And then the mind can use that information, that knowledge to create, right? But we have it backwards. It's like we have this thing doing all the work, and it's just one part of a larger body.
Yeah, just like for some reason occurred to me that this is our time traveling mechanism. And that's why we aspired towards that, to have some sort of way to travel through time. And we do. And so a lot of us will spend too much time in that time traveling instead of, like you're saying, presencing through the five senses and like really taking in all of it through this entire vessel, as opposed to just that part where you punch in the numbers and can go to a different time period.
Yeah. That's interesting because it reminds me of something I heard in podcast once about this person's kind of rough theory was something along the lines of like a lot of mental illness, like depression, anxiety, and all these things. He was saying that it stems from not being able to remember well. So he was saying that if you go through an experience and you're in that present enough, or you have somewhat the ability to be there, then you integrate that into your body and there's no need to relive it over and over and over. But if for whatever reason you're not able to do that, then the distance between like who you are and that situation that like created something for you, some kind of important moment, feels longer and longer. And he was saying like that separation between being able to be in the thing and then encode that memory much more viscerally and physically, instead of having it as like a theater projecting in your head. He argued that he felt like a lot of mental illness stemmed from that, from actually not being able to remember well, which I thought was interesting. I don't know too much about that to delve deeper in it, but yeah, there's something I just wanted to bring out, remembering, because when you said it, Lizelle, it also, there was something there too, I think.
The remembering that I'm kind of like really hungry for at this stage is a very deeper remembering. It's like remembering back to when we were one, and before the Big Bang type of thing. Like that remembering of all of existence before us. That type of remembering I'm hungry for. And I know it's not really, well, maybe it's possible, I don't know. But that's, I think, what I mean mostly with the deep remembering. But Isa, when the words that you said explaining this phenomenon of people is actually a coping mechanism, that people separate themselves from what's happening, and then and it's terrible. I've read a couple of books about how people are so disengaged from their disengaged, or so so separated their sense of being here from their body, that they can't even feel. Like, you can touch them and they don't necessarily feel you touch them. That is severe trauma, and that just shows how far-reaching this can be. This not being in the body, not being present, not remembering, although that.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, remembering it also, it's a little bit like that. Maybe not, I wouldn't put the same words, but when Holly was talking about how easy it is to be like engaged when you're in nature, I was thinking how easy it is to remember, because whenever the sun hits my skin, I remember something, right? I'm like, hello again, for the however millionth lifetime, you know. It's like there's something there that goes like beyond just like, and there's a lot of things like that I think it's not like they're impossible to find in like a human built environment, but for sure there's I think nature has a lot less complexity layers on top of it, so it's easier to just like get into that. And the other thing I was thinking of is like, yesterday I was having a conversation about how because I started doing like a weekly thing where I try to look at what I did in the week and have a bit more awareness of what I've done. And I was just telling this person, like, it's interesting because a few weeks ago it was a terrible week in my head, and then I was like, oh, I've done nothing. And then I realized, oh wait, no, I started walking every day, and I did, that was cool. And then, but then also last week, also a lot of events, like got accepted into grad school and all these big things. And I was telling him, like, why is the reaction so different? Why is like, I only, like, when people remember things, you only remember like, oh, I got accepted into grad school. You don't remember like, oh, I started walking 10,000 steps every day. And his opinion is that because the grad school thing feels a lot like more like something you don't have control over. It's out of your hands. Whereas the walking every day, it's a lot more you. So those things that seem like we didn't have most of the control over it, they somehow stand out more. But I guess what I'm trying to get to is that I was wondering if there's a different way to frame it, as in, because we keep talking about things you have no control over, things we have no control over. And I wonder if there's a better word than control, because I'm not so sure that control is the right way to frame it. And because we were talking about engagement and attention, I was like, maybe engagement is a better word.
Yeah.
Like maybe that's what you do when that's what Holly did in the lightning storm. Is like that's when you have no control over a situation, then you just choose to engage with whatever happens.
Sorry, I just want to point out, and then Holly, you need to speak. Holly is gone. It's just the sun. Holly has been replaced by the sun.
Just as I talk about the sunlight.
Yeah. Yeah, love that. I can't see it. It's great. Like,
You will see it on the. We can't see you anymore. We see a shadow.
Like, perfect. I love disappearing. I have no control, no agency on that.
No control.
Yeah, agency was another word that kind of came up.
Yeah, I was thinking like relationship with, yeah.
But we don't want to lose agency. So we don't want to, when you say give up control, that's not what we, at least for me, the way I understand agency is exactly not what because agency is that being able to participate, which is not control. It's being engaged, being able to be engaged. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I feel like that's what that's the power of the mind. It's like mind helps us have agency over what we tend to. It helps us direct our attention and participate. And where my sense is the body like has the information of how to participate, and then the mind's able to sort of execute that. And like when Isa was talking about the sun and what there's the word came up for me was recognition, right? Like how the remembering is more powerful or more potent when you're out in the real world, in something in this earthy material world. And recognition, it's a remembering. It's like seeing something and like being like that, the distance between separation, like somehow the gap closes. It's like I see something and there's this, my cognitive, something gets rewired, and there's something in there that I see myself in more easily, I guess. It's like nature for me provides just a clear mirror of what I am and who I am. And then that deepens, is what Lizelle was saying, is remembering my true nature, which is this incredibly beautiful world. And then from that information, from that deepening into the sacred, into the remembering of this source, of this primordial essence that we all carry, that we're not separate ultimately. that information then allows me to act, allows my mind then to imagine and create and act in a way that's holy, in a way that honors and uplifts that original source, that uplifts the beauty in nature. So for me, the mind, it's not like, oh, I don't want to think or fuck the mind. It's like, it's the tool of agency, and it's the tool to listen and then enact, to enhance and engage in a way that uplifts the holiness, that it's a devotion. It's like a tool of deep devotion that enacts that devotion.
But Holly, exactly that. You call it a tool of devotion. To me, our agency does not lie in the mind solely. It lies in the body. It most definitely lies in the heart. That wholehearted living, that is being a very active agent, taking up more agency. So I'm curious, because you said a lot of beautiful things, but I'm curious if you reframe that from the idea that maybe agency is in our entire body as well. Maybe agency is not just in our mind. Maybe agency comes from for me, it's the heart. The heart is the agency. Yeah, because we can know things and not do it. So we need something else to truly have agency, and that's not in the mind.
Well, for me, I think of knowing as more in the body, right? Like, or that's how I experience it. It's like the knowing is in the body, and I just experience the mind as like that was the word that just came up. I appreciate your reflection, and I'll have to sit with that, because also it's kind of off the cuff. I don't,
Yeah.
But I kind of see it's sort of like and this is like riffing on like Ian McGilchrist's work of like the what does he call it? The mind, the master and the emissary, right? And so the mind being the emissary, like that's I guess that's what I was sort of alluding to in that. But obviously it's just one organ all participating together, and so it's not separate. It's not, compartmentalizing things, but obviously each organ, has its own specific kind of gift. And so each of our parts has this beautiful gift, things it can do. But then I love playing with this disassembling of all those things too, like practicing seeing with my eyes, hearing with my nose, smelling with my tongue. It's like disassembling actually even how we've compartmentalized and named our different senses. Like I think there's more to it than that even. So yeah, so it's weird. So you're like, what's the gift of each of these parts that I'm composed of? The violin, the flute, the saxophone, what it all does and can do to create a symphony. And also, can we expand it even more? Like, are there things too that are still hidden that, like, if we were to disassemble all the ways we've named and labeled things, if we can go back in, dive deep into the mystery of something, like, to me, that I know when I get lost in this Nine of Thunder place, it's again going into the mystery, going into the curiosity of like actually having agency to create chaos intentionally, in a way to say, actually, I don't know anything that's going on. I know nothing. I don't know who Issa is. I don't know who Lizelle is. I don't know who Sarah is. If I can like bring that into the fold, then a whole world opens up for me.
It just reminds me this weird, funny thing that happens, that I don't know if it's humility, but what you said now was like that recognition of there's so much I don't know. There's so much that I take for granted that is not true. Or it's just this heuristic to help me navigate life. But I know there's more beyond it. And at least for me personally, there's the moments that I've felt the greatest, as in literally like the biggest thing in the universe, are also the moment when I recognize just how minuscule I am. It's like those things go hand in hand, and it's really interesting because whenever I have those moments of like that deep recognition, it's not putting myself down. It's not like, ah, yeah, I'm a piece of, not that. It's like those moments when you have like a deep recognition of like, I'm just a speck. I'm just a piece of dust. And because of that, I'm also like the most amazing thing. It's really interesting because those things usually come hand in hand. I don't think I've had one without the other. And yeah, it's really interesting because we were talking about like that, having that humility of recognizing how small you are. Somehow that's surrendering again. That is like, yeah, that letting go is like, I cannot control all of this. I know I can't. I know there's things that go beyond. Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm jumping a bit, but that's how my brain works. It just reminded me also something I heard last week about.
Before you jump, can I just say one quick thing?
Yeah.
John Vervaeke actually has a meditation about exactly what he calls it the humble wonder meditation. And please now jump. I just needed to say that.
No, that I love it. I might try to listen for that. But no, it just reminded me. I was listening. I think it was Tyson Yunkaporta in his podcast, and he was talking about how people have this idea that initiation, at least for men, it's like, oh, you'll go alone into the bush and you'll be alone, and it's all about you'll be a man because you learn to be alone. And he's like, no, that's the actual opposite. He's like, the whole purpose of being alone in the nothingness of the wilderness is just to realize how much of a nothing you are without the relationships.
Yes.
How much of a piece of nothing you are if you're not in a relationship with nature and with people and with your family and with everyone around you and with the animals and with the sky and with whatever it is. It's like somehow people now have this idea that the rite of passage or something, like it's just to be the most independent, complete human. Is like it's the actual opposite. You go through that to realize how you could not live like that. You go through that to realize that you are nothing without all these dependencies. So like just fucking deal with it and accept it and accept that there's more beyond you. And when you accept that, that's how big, maybe that's what it is like in that moment of realizing how small you are, you're also recognizing all the connections beyond you. And then that greatness comes from realizing that I am everything, not as the speck of dust, but as the network of everything that is connected.
Yeah, I've heard him say that too, Issa. It's really beautiful how it's you're nothing, you're fucking nothing, but you're part of something really special. Like, what you're a participant in is super, super special. So it's like that humility of like, you're not special. You're not fucking special. But what you are participating in is so incredibly special. But yeah, when he says that, it's, it's jarring sometimes. It's like, you're not fucking special, and I'm like, but I am special.
Who says that? Who says that?
Tyson Yunkaporta. Like from their Aboriginal culture, but it's that smallness. It's like uplifting that smallness, that humility that Issa is pointing to, but how it's all paradox, right? So in that smallness is actually when you feel the bigness of life.
Yeah, one of the ways that I was thinking about presenting this too is when Richard Rudd talks about, well, actually, I think he's quoting someone, Wordsworth or someone, about spots of time and being able to like reflect on spots of time. And one of those spots of time that Richard Rudd reflects on is when the Olympics was held in London, I think, maybe. But just how like the general feeling in London is normally not people saying hey to one another on the subway. It's normally, from his perspective, I guess, more everyone's to themselves. But during the Olympics, he was like, it was a whole different thing. Like people are smiling at each other saying, hey, how are you? And it was just like a whole different experience. So that was a different way of presenting that same idea that Issa was bringing up earlier about Oh, I was trying to connect it back to it, but I don't think I'm going to be able to now because I got up and got coffee.
I think we're all off topic now because we're all now concerned about Rebecca.
Yeah, that spots of time thing though, it goes back to that idea of time traveling through the mind and being able to re-access, re-enter. And that's kind of one of my tactics for when I do get so stressed out, when I am in the moment so deeply. I pan out and I think about myself from a different time period, and that opening up of space and just seeing how different I am now. Yeah, it's almost like, I don't know, giving myself a wink or something from the future, from the past. That it's like, I know it feels heavy right now, and it's felt heavy before, and it's going to feel heavy again. But here I am, and you made it. I just get that sense when I'm in this position of face in palms, not able to make a decision.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because sometimes it can feel like there's some fault in like the thunder coming, right? And then you get through it and you're like, okay, I'm done. And then it's like, no, thunder's gonna be rolling through my life continuously, And so then it's this is why, like, I think an inquiry into the wheel and stuff like that is so potent, because it's not about trying to get rid of the cycles, but it's knowing how to work with them. It's knowing how to engage with them. It's knowing how to be in relationship to the lightning and to these natural cycles. Because I think that can add more lightning, is when you're also blaming yourself, or like that can be kind of the anguish, like I shouldn't be feeling this, or this shouldn't be happening, rather than what you're saying is sort of like, this is just sort of a natural process. This is how nature works.
It is really interesting because what you're saying, this is still like a very undeveloped idea, but the thing you're saying about like thunder is gonna come and it keeps rolling, and there's this thing we do that somehow, if we make it like it's our fault that it happened, right, like then it turns into shame. And I was thinking about this because how I told you guys that I accidentally burnt my floor, like the vinyl, and there's like a scorch mark, and I threw out all the candles and stuff except the one that melted, because the reason that happened is that it was one of these like tiny ones that has like a plastic, I don't know, case instead of the metal one, so the plastic melted, and like the only thing left in that room is that burned down melted candle. And the other day I saw it, I was like, why didn't I throw this out? Why did I like keep this reminder of the accident so I could look at it and feel shame every time? And then I started wondering, like, maybe that's what shame is. Shame is like a weird way of remembering. Is like proof. Look, this thing happened. It was a shitty thing, but here it is, and I carry it with me, and it's like all these swords through my body, but I carry it with me. And I was wondering, I don't know, so now I'm thinking, I was like, maybe that's what shame is. There's something about shame that it maybe is like trying to carry proof of the thunder, instead of in trying to use that as a way to remember, instead of actually like letting it go. There's like, oh, if I can have control over the thunder, then I'm gonna make a story about it, about how I chose to suffer, or I don't know where I'm getting at, but there's something there, I think, with like internalizing those things as if it's our fault. And there's something about shame that I think is also linked to memory and how we choose to carry things and how we choose to frame those thunders. So yeah,
I think you're talking about like turning ourselves into victims, right? Like that there's an empowerment in becoming the victim. So if you're feeling disempowered, you're feeling, and again, I'm just gonna use the word control, because even though we might be like playing with that, but yeah, if I don't have control, if I can become the victim, then there's actually something that I can then, it's like my badge of you know, strength.
They use the words grief and regret in the card, and when you were speaking, that came up because the thunderstorm I just experienced was because of regret, but then it is also something that I did wrong. Like my bad, I fucked up, like, and the consequences are heavy. And so for me, the thunderstorm is because, like I mentioned, it's that release. Then it's like sometimes you just gotta go through that thunderstorm, and just and not keep the candle, but fucking just deal with the candle and then destroy it, type of thing. That type of thing. That because we do have agency, and sometimes our life goes wrong because we made poor decisions, and I think it's wise that there should be some grief in that, like grief for what life could have been if I was wiser way back then, and grief for what life could have been if I was wiser today, which I'm alas not. But yeah, so for me the thunder is actually that healing part then, that
But that's learning, right? Isn't that what learning is?
yeah, but you have to sometimes go through it. I think you have to allow yourself to be engaged, coming back to the engage, to be engaged with your shame or guilt. I like guilt more than shame, because shame feels like a cultural thing that others put on us, but guilt is something real if we fucked up. And then engage with it and let it fucking be destroyed by Zeus's thunderbolts, type of thing. Welcome, sister.
Oh God, I'm so sorry. I thought I was 5 minutes late because I couldn't get on, but I was actually an hour and 5 minutes late. Oh, what a mess.
Well, we're so glad you're here.
We're definitely glad you're here.
Dinosaurs. Dinosaurs.
And we definitely quoted you at least 5
Oh,
times.
yes, you were
It's like-
so.
It was so, I wanted to point it out. I was like, I'm just going to let it go. Before you officially joined us, Rebecca, we talked about you all the time. And then when you're here, we don't necessarily talk about you because you're here. But now that you were here, we talked about you all the time again.
Oh no, I'm really, really sorry. That's inexcusable. That's terrible. I don't know why. I just put it down as 2:00 on my thing, and yeah, just.
Well, it is
there.
2:00, but it's 2:00 for me, not for you.
I will promise to try and do better. I am very sorry, and I'm sorry to have missed out. Although obviously I can go back and watch it, but I'm sorry to have missed out. Can you give me like a summary of what you've been talking about?
Yeah,
Oh,
We were literally all over the place, I
That's
think.
typical. Yeah, yeah. But like anguish. Well, I actually, why don't I would like to invite you, Rebecca, just to hear what your take on this card is.
especially as it compares to your, understanding of the traditional Rider Waite and then the Thunder card that has been presented, because we've been kind of playing with that Thunder and Swords a little bit too.
Oh,
Yeah,
this
can I
will
have a
be
look at the Thunder card?
this will be so interesting now to get in a new perspective, fresh
I
perspective.
feel like this is a bit of a test. Have you got the Thoth out?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
There's
cruelty. Yeah. So I've got the Thoth and the Rider Waite here. I don't know if I told you guys I have a cheat code for the tarot. And it is you can read the cards 1 through 10 in light of 1 through 10 in the major arcana. So because it's 9, that's the Hermit, and then Swords is mind. Air, obviously the element of air. So that's kind of, especially considering using the Thoth, which I love to do now because it's so beautiful and wonderful. But there's not that much. I mean, there is some imagery, but not as detailed as the Rider Waite. So because it's a pip deck. So having that background knowledge of reading it through the major arcana is super helpful. And that makes me think that the cruelty that is referenced in the keyword for the Thoth card is speaking to the sort of cruelty of someone who is isolated from the other elements and is only operating through the mind, only through the incision of the sword. And and then looking at the Rider Waite, that thing of isolation again, and that being up in the middle of the night weeping into your hands because you're so alone, which is exactly what happens to someone who gets trapped inside their mind and can't connect with the other elements of themselves or other people. Yeah, that's like it's interesting. I'm not sure how I think about the idea of that being linked to thunder. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'd have to sit with and look at the imagery on your card a bit longer to really like try and click those things together.
I want to present something to you, Rebecca, because you and I both share this gene key 51 for our life's work, and it is the archetype of thunder with Unlock Your Designs website, but it's about initiating people or initiating, not necessarily people, but just initiating with like shock value. So it's almost like could be provocative, but kind of presenting something to someone that maybe they don't necessarily want to see, but it causes them to act. So it's not me acting on someone, it's just me or you doing something, and then this brings up something for someone that maybe they didn't necessarily want to see.
Wow. Yeah. And that could definitely be interpreted as cruel.
But Isa, what you talked about really actually kind of relates to what Rebecca's saying about that shame, especially. And because that's here when your mind's busy with yourself and how what you did wrong. Maybe you can speak on that.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking about, I don't even remember how we got there, but I was talking about how we were talking a lot about how, I mean, a few things like how thunder in nature, it has a bit of this like cleansing element, like it cleans the air out of humidity and it helps things and like things flow. So thunderstorms, even if they sound terrifying, they're very necessary. And how I think this card, at least the one from the Gentle Tarot, it's about how like all these suppressed emotions and suppressed things that have been just trying to be turned into thinking exclusively, and how we need those emotional thunderstorms too to like move on to things. And I was talking about how I found it interesting because I told you guys that I had this accident with the candle and I burnt the floor. And I cleaned the whole thing. I removed the wax. I did a lot of things, but I didn't throw out the culprit, the one piece of candle that melted and scorched my floor. And it's there. It's like every time I go into that room, I see it. But the other day I was like, why is this here? Like, why do I still keep this? And part of me was like, oh, this is like some evidence, it's like proof that this thing happened. But every time I look at it, it also gives me like shame and guilt. So yeah, I don't know. And I was talking about how maybe there's something about shame that is like a weird way of misremembering, like you try to make a connection to an event in some sort of framing, some kind of story that is, it feels like you have more control over. It's like than the accident itself, or something that you didn't really think that would happen, because that's where the shame comes, right? Or the guilt is like, oh, how couldn't I possibly conceive that something like this could happen? So yeah, I don't know how this ties into cruelty or stuff, but that's what we're talking about. But there's definitely that thing of when you were talking about like piercing, like the sword and how it pierces, I was really thinking like, oh, imagine being so like, it's just gonna sound a bit morbid, but imagine being so like dead, numb, that the only way you can feel is through piercing things with a sword. Like imagine that, like cutting into something is the only way that you actually get any sort of stimuli. Because we were also talking about that, like how a lot of things these days are so numbing. And how the biggest fear apparently we all have is to be bored. That's the number one fear.
But isn't it a form of cruelty to yourself, to keep reminding yourself of past guilt and past shame.
Yeah.
Isn't that a form of mental cruelty?
Yes. And it's a trapping. And it's like, it's refusing to dance with the storm, right? It's like, I don't want to face whatever else is here. So instead of that, I'm going to like tie myself into the story that I fabricated. So it feels like I have ownership over it. It feels like I have agency over it, even if it's the story of my own demise, right? Like that's, we do that stuff.
Well, it's interesting. Like I'm thinking about when I was sharing that story about being caught in the lightning storm and the surrender. And actually there is a kind of cruelty in some way, because I was just like, oh, how do I not die? How do I not die? You know, which is normal and good, right? Like it's like I'm trying to make sure I'm safe. But like also at the same time, it's sort of interesting to hear you say that, because there is actually a cruelty. There's a cruelty in like making it all about me and actually not being able to engage with the storm. Like I'm actually making the beauty of the lightning and the storm, I'm putting a barrier between us, and I'm not seeing it for the fullness of what it is and the beauty and the mystery of what it is. And so there's a cruelty, and I like this isolation piece Rebecca pointed to, of making it all about my own internal world rather than like, oh my God, like look at what I'm participating in, look at what's in front of me. And there's something cruel about not seeing other.
But Holly, it's also pretty normal.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I was saying it's a process. It's a process, right? Like it's not, I'm not like supposed to be in the thunder and being like, or maybe not supposed to. I don't want to use that, and I don't want to use it. But
I'm in awe of your story. I think it's beautiful that you were able to make that switch, because honestly, that was the only switch you were able to make. Like you said, you couldn't leave. You had to make that mental switch.
Yeah.
And that is kindness towards yourself, to let it go, to surrender to the thunder. So the opposite of cruelty indeed is, to not.
Yeah. I just looked up real quick the origin of cruel, because I was like, what's the word there? And it comes from crude, which actually means comes from raw. So actually it's linked to either raw, unprepared. So there again, there's something about like being unprepared for a situation, feeling like you didn't foresee something.
You're off, Sarah.
Sorry, I have to because of dogs, but that brought up for me that whole unseen thing, because this is the sword suit and it's air, and that was something that was said in a poem that was given to us for the ritual, and that was really sweet to me, was that recognition that air signs, as somebody that's double air, we're in air sign season, it's Gemini season right now, but air signs have this thing about being seen or not being seen, because Aquarius, it's like, don't look at me. Gemini, it's like, here I am. So but there's something there too about thoughts being unseen, that whole realm being unseen. It's such a hidden enemy to us.
When I was looking at the Rider Waite one of the woman crying with the swords above her, it made me think of the long dark night of the soul, of that, like, and that, like, you're talking about the being seen and unseen thing, like those, like there's lots of them in all spiritual traditions, like these stories of people waking up in the middle of the night and facing demons of whatever variety, and like it's just a thing that happens to us, isn't it? But like it's a common human experience to have that. And although, I mean, like in the past when people, as a community practice segmented sleep, they would have had other people to see them in the middle of the night. But now you're just waking up and you're alone, and you have to face, and it might be the only time that you're alone in your whole day, or in your whole life, maybe, depending on how your life goes, and and how weirdly exaggerated, it's almost psychedelic, how everything seems hyper real, not hyper real in the Baudrillardian sense, but it's like, like it's really, really real. Like it feels intensely real, but then you will also know that it won't feel this real in the morning. And that like there's that weird, and that's one of the weird qualities that being alone with your thoughts has. Like, I don't know quite what to make of it, because when you're in it, just like when you're in some kind of psychedelic experience, you think the real world is all nonsense and this is it, because it feels so intense. And then the next morning, or when you come down from your trip, I want to say you realize that that's not the case, but maybe you're deluded into thinking that's not the case. I don't know. It's just like another form of consciousness that you can be in. And I guess, and thinking about this card in relation to the hermit, like that's the kind of consciousness that hermits live in all the time. And I see this card as showing a negative side of that, but obviously, like, you know, there are many positive sides to being a hermit. Thought about it much myself, but yeah, I don't know.
I like that what you're evoking too in the Thoth is like the blood, right? And so there's also like that play between being really in your head and then like being blood, like being so like the formlessness sometimes of our thinking in that dark night element, and then also like then bringing those thoughts actually into the blood, or something about blood is really coming up. The important, like I think maybe that's the elemental component here of like you're saying, not just being isolated in your mind or in the air, but also like making sure air has blood through which to express itself, a body it can breathe through, right?
Yeah, maybe that's the pain, like, because you can be trapped when you're trapped in your head. It's not it's like the transition when you get dragged back into the real world. That's maybe when the pain happens. You could just live in your head forever and be kind of numb, in a way. Or you could, yeah, I don't know.
And isn't that lightning, like that thing that connects the air to the ground?
Yes. Yeah.
And it illuminates, right? It illuminates the darkness, right? From the darkness, through the darkness, it illuminates.
That is really
insight.
Mm-hmm. Insight.
Sarah, go ahead.
That's all I was going to say, was it's an insight lightning flash. Yeah.
I recently told Sarah, because for our trip through Awakening, I had to read quite a number of Gnostic texts. And I got so lost in this worldview. And I felt so unreal, because this felt so real to me, this Gnostic way of being, that I was alone in it. I was isolated in it, because it was me reading books. It wasn't me with a community practicing Gnostic rituals and speaking about Gnostic things. It was just me and my books. And it was actually quite a horrible experience. I felt so unreal. And coming back was actually a relief then. That lightning striking the earth, that air being broken, that was actually quite a relief to come back to the blood.
Well, it's funny you put it that way, because they're not offering the blood of Christ for our Eucharist for the Catholic Church. They're because of the pandemic and things, they're no longer offering the blood of Christ. But I've been taking my maca, so I always call this the blood of Christ. But yeah, that's something that, you know, I also, nearly the same time that you started reading all these Gnostic texts, I was like really like, I need to like really get on the rosary every day, and you know, I'm taking up these practices and things. But it was a similar thing where I'm doing it all by myself. And we attended a couple of Catholic churches. Or the first one, we went every, you know, Easter. Well, we went Easter, sorry, not every Easter, but we went just this Easter, and then every Sunday after for a while. And I mean, we hardly talked to anybody. So it didn't feel like, but this was the one my mom wanted to go to, because the alternative is the one that she got married in, the one that she had me in baptized, the one that she also had her first communion. It's a lot attached to this one, but we went. So we went, and of course, she's having the remembering of all of these moments, spots of time in her life when these things have happened. And anyway, I think it sent us both into a similar kind of like thunder strike where I was like, however long this process takes for me, pursuing whatever it is that I'm pursuing, just something, something to believe in, something to participate with that brings me to goodness. If I don't take the exact same path as everybody else, if it's not as direct as everybody else's, then, it doesn't have to be. So I'm not forcing myself into that state anymore either of, the trying to force it to where it doesn't feel real anymore. It no longer felt like, it was almost like when I went to my dad and I said, hey, tell me about all your fears so that I can internalize those and now they're mine to conquer. It was the same kind of thing where I thought I could just get the upload, switch my operating system just like I did from Android to Mac, and now we're rocking and rolling. But it wasn't like that, and I don't think it should be. I need to take a lot of time with building my relationship with whatever it is on the other side, but it feels good when I do take that time, but not when I'm forcing myself to do it in a certain kind of way. So yeah, that was keeping me up at night, I will say. Like, how can I reconcile these things that I know to be true to me? So there's some relief in finally making a decision to be like, it's me. Doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense. Doesn't matter if it's a contradiction. That's what I am. And I've been made to be that way. So.
You are huge. You contain multitudes.
It's kind of what we were talking about when you joined. About the paradox of feeling at your biggest when you have the humility to recognize how small you are.
Yeah. And how, we often think about, the hubris of thinking we can understand the world, but there's also hubris in thinking that we can understand ourselves. And that the thought that I could, I have similar thoughts, right? Oh, I have this side of myself, I have this side of myself, they're huge contradiction. How can I resolve them and tidy everything up? But the idea that I could stand outside myself and judge what is and what isn't a contradiction is madness, really. Yeah, because
you're judging yourself from yourself, which is kind of a self-recurring thing. It's actually like a logical fallacy too, because you can't stand out of yourself.
The card says something about a third person perspective, I think.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, I think I often think that my friends understand me better than I understand me. And I will be mystified by something I've done or something I've said, and I don't know why I feel this way. And one of you guys will be like, well, it's really obvious why you feel this way.
Well, and it makes so much sense why people get, me as an example, caught up into a relationship where it's abusive. You're a moron, you're an idiot, how could you have possibly? And then I start, well, am I a moron? Yeah, I'm a moron. And then it just goes and goes and goes. And if you only have one person telling you what you are, because you've eliminated everybody else because they're not good for you, then you get to a point where that's the only message that you're continuing to cycle. And I got there. And I don't know, there's I'm having a contradiction in my mind of keeping a lot of options open for people that I can be, because there's a lot of people that know me and they provide me a reflection of myself. But then there's that struggle of, oops, I've got too many, because now this is what we're talking about with the card. So there's that balance of allowing there to be people that you reflect with, but maybe like an intimate group like this, where I've got, 5 or 10 women that I'm bouncing ideas back on, or, guys too, whatever, but smaller groups. And that's the interesting thing, small communities. And what did we used to live in? Much smaller anyway. Now.
I used to think of the self, and I didn't change my mind, but I just haven't thought of this in a while, as a type of diamond, and that the diamond is crafted with different sides, and every friend crafts a different side of the diamond. So we are polished and made into, because we start out at this rough diamond, and then our friends, different friends, have to contribute to different sides of us, so that the light can shine through at its most effective way, something like that.
There's a
love
very common metaphor in Zen, is the rock tumbler, that, you know, we polish each other by bumping up against each other. And this is kind of hearkening back to like that, what we were looking at of recognition and being able to see yourself more clearly in nature, like versus the virtual world, like versus like social media stuff. And I think there's something also like true about that with relationships. And like I find that I can see myself more clearly, like kind of Rebecca was pointing to, with people who have also done a lot of like deep reflection of themselves. And so it's almost like finding people who are like nature in that way. Like, you know, like I can see myself more clearly with a tree than I can with this mug, you know, although I can still see myself with the mug, but it just takes a lot more work.
Oh, that is a gorgeous mug, though.
Yeah, so. It is a great mug. Yeah, that one's a little bit easier. Let's say this mouse, okay? Fingernail clippers. But the importance of trust with others, and finding the right people to which that are reflecting something back that does feel more nourishing or authentic, or like growth enhancing, I guess. I don't know the right word, but quality of other is also, like, I think, important as well, as far as something that people who also just like nature, like really have the sacred at the center of things.
It reminds me, I mean, someone I heard this was like in an urban planning context, so we were talking about cities and like really poor neighborhoods and stuff like that. And what this person was saying is that what they considered to be let's say the actual poverty of the poor neighborhoods, according to his analysis, was lack of access to that information, lack of access to those things that come from outside. So it's like that same thing. It's like the isolated person who only has themselves to figure things out. You know, it's the same thing. It's like the big indicator here, or the big thing that will show that a community or a group or whatever will stay poor, or whatever poverty means. I mean, that's for debate, but that's a different thing. But I just thought it was interesting that they framed it in terms of access to information, in terms of how much things can come into this community, be processed, and then go out and have some sort of like, feedback. That lack of feedback was the true poverty, according to this person. So that also just that came up when you were talking about like the person alone with their own thoughts, with no outside feedback, or the person alone, because Sarah was saying that for her, when she saw that image, it reminded her of someone like looking at their phone alone on the bed. Scrolling through social media. So it's also that, because that's what's happening too, right? Is like these kind of things don't have the feedback capacity. Like you cannot interact with them. You're just this passive receptor. Or the way of interacting is very superficial. Like you type things and you leave a text and that's about it. Like it's an extremely abstracted thing that doesn't involve your body, that doesn't involve you going through something, actually like reacting, not through like just feeling the things, but actually taking responsibility over that reaction and doing something about it, right? So yeah, there's something about that, again, that the hermit chooses to be isolated, I guess, but yeah.
There's no knowing in that social media. That's the problem. You don't really know. There's no knowing, intimate knowing. That's a problem. While you were speaking, is like the most horrible images came to me. I was thinking of autobiosis and like how we are these all systems, and also human beings, or these feedback loops that we take in information if possible, we take in information and process it and adopt to the environment. And then the image that came to me, if we don't have access to external sources, to others, then it's like having to drink your own urine all the time, or having to eat your own vomit. That's all you have, and that's quite nauseating to me, at least. Maybe it's.
I've drinking my own urine, and I don't recommend it. It's pretty fucking disgusting. Only in survival situation. You know?
But if that's the only thing that you have to sustain yourself for a limited period, by all means, do what you need to do to survive. But if that is the only thing for your entire life, you have to sustain yourself, your own urine and your own vomit. That's what nutrients are going to be left in the vomit eventually, if that's
And that's the situation you end up at either ends of the spectrum, whether you're alone, like literally on your own, or if you're sitting up at night scrolling. Either way, it's you reflected back, because like Isa said, there's no knowing, there's no, and that's what creates actual, food and drink that you can sustain yourself with, sustain your psyche with, as a product of the knowing. So it's really funny, actually, thinking of swords as the soup of mind and intellect and stuff, and yet if you're only using swords, you get no knowledge. Like the whole selling point of your mind is like, oh great, get a big brain and think really hard about stuff and you'll know stuff. But if that's all you do, you never know anything.
But that's if you don't take Verbeek's 4 ways of knowing into account.
That's true.
Yeah, knowing is much deeper than just propositions.
I don't think the author of the Rider Waite, whichever one, was up on his Verbeek.
I actually have to transition. So any final thoughts or anything as we kind of wrap up?
I just want to express that I'm grateful that I don't have to eat my own vomit, because I have all of you. Nothing is sustaining me.
Ice cream's so much better than vomit. Water is so much better than urine.
Yeah. I think for me, I don't know, there was a few, I'll need to collect them when I see this again. There was a few like specific phrases and specific uses of words that really stood out to me this time. But the one I remember right now, Lizelle, is when you said break the air. I like that, because we tend to think as air is not a thing that breaks, it's like a fluid. So I like the idea of breaking the air. Somehow finding a way to split it.
Were you talking
Not
about
getting
thunderstorms when you said break the air?
Yeah.
Because that's like the breaking apart of the positive and negative ions that causes lightning. I don't know. Just that's the image that came into my head. It's like a really beautiful poetic image.
And it makes me think of breath too, like breaking it. Like there's something there too.
Yeah, sword. That's the air.
I think so, Rebecca. I think because Isa actually went into the natural phenomenon of thunder, and that's what brought that. And
I love that, because it's like it's broken apart, but then there's that magnetism that pulls it back together. So it's like